Hello and welcome to Torah Thoughts. The Torah portion that we read this week, the Parsha of the week, is Parshat Vayechi, which means "and he lived." So the Torah in this Parsha is describing the final days in the life of the third patriarch, Yaakov. And I want to draw your attention to a few parallels that we see between the Parsha from 4 weeks ago, Parshat Vayishlach, and this week's Parsha. So we see a few themes that seem to be repeating what happened in Vayishlach, and now it seems to be addressed again in this week's Parsha. So we'll start with, in the beginning of Parshat Vayishlach, Yaakov spent many years in Haran. He got married, he had children, he's headed back to Canaan now, the land of Israel. And what's happening is Yaakov, on his way back into Canaan, finds out that his older brother Esav is still hunting for him, and he's still out to get him. And you see the whole sibling rivalry between Yaakov and Esav. And then you see something similar going on in this week's parsha. Not so much a rivalry, but somewhat of a comparison between the older brother and the younger brother. Whereas Yaakov deals with Yosef's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Now Manasseh is the older one, Ephraim is the younger one, but Yaakov switches them, and he now makes Ephraim the more dominant one. So what we see here happening is Yaakov is about to die. Yosef hears that his father is nearing death, and he brings his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, to Yaakov to bless them, so that Yaakov can bless them before he dies. And Yaakov says, okay, bring them near me so I can bless them. And so Yosef nudges Ephraim and Manasseh towards Yaakov, so that Ephraim is on Yaakov's right side and Manasseh is on Yaakov's left side. And as they come closer to Yaakov crosses his arms as he puts his hands on their head, so that his right arm ends up on Ephraim's head, and his left hand ends up on Manasseh's head. Yosef sees this and he tries to correct it. So the Torah tells us that Yosef tried to actually lift up Yaakov's hand and move his right hand over onto Manasseh's head, and Yaakov says, no, I know that he's the older one, he's the younger one, but nonetheless he'll do great things. Meaning Manasseh, great personalities and great history will come of him, but Ephraim, the tribe that comes of Ephraim, will be even greater. And what we see here, what is the connection between Yaakov's rivalry with Esav and this whole thing that's going on with Ephraim and Manasseh switching places? It seems to be some sort of a coming to a head of a theme that's been going on since the beginning of the Torah. We have in Bereshit, in the beginning, we have a rivalry between the older brother Cain and the younger brother Adam Harishon, his oldest son Cain, and the younger son Hevel. And they each brought sacrifices to God. Hevel's sacrifice was accepted. Cain's sacrifice was rejected. And Cain gets jealous of his younger brother, and he kills him. Then further on, later on, we see a similar situation between Yitzchak and Yishmael. Abraham is promised that from his children will come a great nation, many great nations in fact, and many blessings that God gave to Abraham will be passed on to his children. And God says to Abraham, it'll be your younger son, Yitzchak, that all these blessings pass on to, not the older son, Yishmael. And Yishmael at first rejects that, and he's jealous of Yitzchak. In fact, Abraham had to send Yishmael out of the house, so that he was a danger to Yitzchak, because he was jealous that Yitzchak received, the younger brother received those blessings. We see that again with Yaakov and Esav. Esav was the older twin. Esav felt he was entitled to the blessings. Yaakov managed to trick Esav out of those blessings, and now Esav wants to kill him. This is what we see in Vayishlach, that this grudge, this vendetta that Esav had against Yaakov, it continued for years and years, even as Yaakov is returning to Canaan. This goes on with Yaakov's children as well. Yaakov's favorite son was Yosef, as we see in Parshat Vayeshev, that Yosef was the 11th of 12 sons, meaning he had 10 older brothers, and they resented the fact that the younger brother sees himself as somewhat of a king. Remember, he had the dreams which indicated that he believed that at some point he would rule over his brothers. That actually came true, but they resented the fact that the younger brother sees himself as above us, and in fact Yaakov sees him as the favorite son, And they resented that, and that's what led to them initially wanting to kill him, but then they sold him as a slave into Egypt. And now we come to the culmination. We come to Yosef's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and Yaakov says, no, Ephraim, the younger brother, again, will be superior to the older brother. But finally we see that it's accepted. We don't see any of the rivalry. We don't see any of the fighting. Yaakov says that Ephraim, the younger brother, will get top billing, so to speak. He will outshine the older brother, and Manasseh accepts that. So finally we see that Manasseh accepts the will of God. Remember, it was God that God accepted Hevel's sacrifice and that kind. It was God that wanted Yitzchak to inherit the blessings and not Ishmael. It was God that wanted Yaakov to get those blessings that he stole from Esav. Although he made Yaakov go through the process, he later on acknowledged, I will bless you and I want you to get those blessings. This is all the will of God. And finally, Ephraim and Manasseh accepts when Yaakov says that it is God's will that the younger brother will lead. And in fact, from Ephraim comes the great leader Yoshua, who took Moses' place. When Moshe died, Yoshua is the one who led the Jews into Israel. So he was Moshe's top student. He taught Torah to the nation of Israel following Moshe's death. And he was also the general, the military leader, and he ultimately helped the Jews conquer much of Israel. We know also that when, after the death of King Solomon, of Shlomo HaMelech, his son Achaz didn't rule over the entire nation of Israel. There was a civil war and there was a split. So of the 12 tribes of Israel, 10 of them retained the name Israel, and 2 of them, the tribe of Yehuda and Benjamin, they got the name the Kingdom of Judah, the Kingdom of Yehuda. That's why today we're called Jews. And those other 10 tribes who kept the name Israel, they were led by the tribe of Ephraim. So we see that Ephraim actually did take a major role in the history of the nation of Israel, and this was the prophecy of Yaakov. And Manasseh, finally, after all these generations of the sibling rivalry, Manasseh accepts this as the will of God. The other parallel we see between Vayishlach and Vayechi is the story of Shechem. So what we have here is in Parashat Vayishlach, we see the story of Dinah, Yaakov's daughter. She went out to Shechem and she was raped by the prince of Shechem, whose name also was Shechem. And he rapes Dinah, and he actually had the audacity to think he did nothing wrong. And he goes to his father, Hamor, and he says, I want her. This girl Dinah, whom I had, I want her. And Hamor and Shechem approach Yaakov to actually ask Yaakov to give them Dinah for Hamor as a wife. For Shechem as a wife. Yaakov, of course, is a bit taken aback. He's unsure of what to do, and he waits for his sons to get home. When his sons get home, they decide to play, namely Shimon and Levi, they decide to play a trick on Shechem, and in fact on the entire city. They're going to go to war with them. And when you go to war, they wiped out the entire city. So what did they do? They said, well, you know what? We can't have you marry our sister because you see you're not circumcised. You got to circumcise. If you circumcise, we'll accept you. We'll become one family. You'll marry our daughter. We'll marry our sister. We'll marry into your family with your daughters. It'll all be beautiful. And of course, that's not what they intended. Shechem and Hamor go back and convince the entire town, the entire kingdom, to go ahead and circumcise themselves. Hey, these people are rich. It's great. We'll be connected to them. They all circumcise themselves. And to circumcise yourself as an adult is a very, very, very difficult and painful process. And it's a very painful recovery, which was what Shimon and Levi were planning on. And on the 3rd day of the recovery, which is when a person is weakest, they attacked. And they wiped out the entire city of Shechem. So what happens then is Yaakov comes to them and he says, oh my God, what have you done? And he protests Shimon and Levi's actions, but mind you, not because it was morally wrong, but as a tactical maneuver. Yaakov says to them, it says, V'yomer Yaakov el Shimon ve'Levi. Yaakov says to Shimon and Levi, Achaltem oti lahavisheni b'yeshev haaretz b'knani u'b'prizi v'ani metai mispar. He says, you have made me odious. What have you done? You brought trouble on me. You've made me odious among the inhabitants of this land, the Knani and the Prizi, and I have very few people, and they have a lot of people. and they're going to attack us. So many people, there's a misconception, many people think that Yaakov was angry at Shimon and Levi for moral reasons for wiping out Shechem. He wasn't. He just said it was a dangerous thing to do. But Shimon and Levi respond with, Hakazona yaseh et achotenu. Shall we let them treat our sister as a prostitute? And essentially what they're saying is, a daughter of Israel does not get treated that way. That is a desecration of God's name. God chose you, Israel, as to be His chosen person. From you will come the chosen nation. You're His special person, His messenger on earth. Your daughter should get treated like a prostitute? That's unacceptable. That's a desecration of God's name. And I don't care how dangerous that is, we can't allow that. And Yaakov seems to accept that argument. Oh, well, if you did it in the name of, to protect God's name, you did it because you felt you were acting on behalf of God's will, so yeah, that's acceptable. But then we see in this week's parsha, in Parshat Vayechi, when Yaakov gives his sons his final words, he kind of takes back his acceptance of what Shimon and Levi did. So what he says is, Shimon v'Levi achim, Shimon and Levi, brothers. What he means is obviously all 12 of them are brothers, but you guys are a team. Klei Hamas mecheroteim. Their weapons are a tool of lawlessness. Meaning you guys don't act responsibly. B'sodom al tavo nafshi. May my person, meaning don't do things in my name. May my person not come among their council, among Shimon and Levi's, when they plan stuff. Meaning don't do it on my behalf. Ubekhalam al techet kavodi. And let not my being be counted among their assembly. Again, he says, when the Torah mentions bad things that were done, that came out of the tribe of Shimon and Levi, I don't want to be mentioned. I don't want that to be with my memory. Now, why? Why is he taking back his acquiescence of what happened with Shechem, when they killed Shechem? He says, Ki ba'apam hagu ish, uvirtzonam ikru shor. Because in their anger, in their wrath, they killed men, meaning they wiped out all of Shechem. And in order to force their will, they attacked an ox. Now, Yosef is the metaphor for an ox. The metaphorical image for Yosef is the ox. Each of the tribes, many of the tribes had metaphorical animals that represent them. Yehuda is a lion, Binyamin is a wolf, and with Yosef it's an ox. So here's Yaakov saying, you killed all of the city of Shechem in your anger. And how do I know that? Because of what you did with Yosef. Originally, Yaakov is saying, when you told me you did it to please heaven, I accepted that. But now I see that you don't act for those reasons. You act out of anger because of what you did with Yosef. You were jealous of Yosef, so you went and sold him as a slave. Now I know that what you did was for the wrong reasons. That's why Yaakov backtracks. Well, not backtracks. Yaakov now says, if that's the case, then what you did was wrong. And then Yaakov goes on. People think Yaakov was cursing Shimon and Levi or even their actions. He's not. He's cursing their motives. He says, Arur apam, may their anger be cursed. Ki az evratam, because it is so fierce. No, I'm sorry. Arur apam ki az ve'evratam ki kashata. May their anger be cursed because it's fierce, and their wrath because it's so relentless. So Yaakov is saying basically, when you do something out of anger, when you do something out of personal anger, then I'm against it. Now I'm saying that what you did back in Shechem, again, not morally, but it was dangerous. Had you done it in the name of sanctifying the name of heaven, then it would have been acceptable. So the next parallel that we have between the parsha of Vayishlach and Vayechi is finally it's the death and the burial of Rachel Imenu, the matriarch Rachel. So what we see is Rachel, again, once they leave, now that they've gone to war, attacked all of Shechem, Yaakov gets a command from God, it's time for you to move on. And they begin to travel, and while they're on the road, Rachel goes into labor. That's when she gave birth to Binyamin, and she dies from that labor. And so what happens is, Yaakov buries her, and they're very close. It's about, I would say, 2,000 meters, about 2 kilometers from the city of Hebron, which is where the family burial spot is. But nonetheless, Yaakov buries her right there on the side of the road where she died. And here we have in Parshat Vayechi, Yaakov is about to die, and he says to Yosef, listen, I'm about to die, and remember, they're living in Egypt now, right? And so Yaakov says to Yosef, I want you to swear to me that when I die, you will take my body back to Hebron and bury me there, in the Ma'arat HaMachpelah. So Yaakov now says to Yosef, I owe you an explanation. He says, and this is one of the most emotional verses in all of the 5 books of the Torah. And generally, when it's taught to children in school, it's actually taught in a song, and it really, really makes it sink in, the message behind this particular verse. It says, Va'ani, and I, meaning Yaakov, B'vo'i mePadan, when I came from Padan Aram, Me'eta alai Rachel. Rachel died on me. Be'eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan, B'derech, middle of the way. B'od kivrat eretz. It was a short, I'd say roughly an acre. B'od kivrat eretz, it was a short distance of land, Lavoy Ephrata, to come to Ephrat, which was actually Kiryat Arba, which was right next to Hebron. Ve'eg Barasham, and I buried it right there, B'derech, on the way. B'derech Ephrat, on the way to Ephrat. He Bet Lechem. This is Bet Lechem. Actually, no, Ephrat is next to Bet Lechem. And he buried Rachel there, and in fact, right out of Bet Lechem, which people call Bethlehem. It's Bet Lechem. It's a Hebrew word. But anyway, so right on the way, as you enter Bet Lechem, on the side of the road is Kever Rachel, Rachel's tomb. And Yaakov is explaining to Yosef, and he says, and the Midrash explains, I know that you might have some resentment, that here I'm asking you to carry my body all the way up to Hebron, and when your mother died, I buried her right there on the side of the road. I didn't even bother to go the 2 kilometers to the family burial site. So I know you might have some resentment for that, but it's important that you know why I did it. And I did it because it was God's will. And Yaakov explains a prophecy to Yosef that he received from God. What's going to happen is, he says, there will come a day when the nation of Israel, the nation that will come from me, from us, will be exiled from the land. And as they're exiled, they're going to be driven down the road, and they're going to pass the spot where Rachel's tomb is. They're going to pass this spot, and they'll pray by their mother's, the matriarch's grave. And as a result, Rachel will pray before God, and then God will respond and promise her that the nation of Israel will someday come back to our land. Now it's amazing how all of that prophecy actually came true. The Jews were in fact exiled. The nation of Israel was in fact exiled. They did pray before Rachel's grave, and the prophet Yirmiyahu, later on actually tells us of the conversation that took place in heaven, where no one was able to beseech God. No one was able to convince is not the right word. Obviously, God doesn't need convincing. But no one was able to pray before God, to stand before God and say, don't do this, bring them back, except for Rachel. And that's the reason why God told Yaakov to bury Rachel by the side of the road. And it was his will, and that's what Yaakov is explaining to Yosef. And so these 3 parallels, these 3 things that kind of like the stories are discussed in Parshat Vayishlach, and it's kind of revisited here in Parshat Vayechi. What's the common theme, the common factor? Why do we have, sometimes things get revisited, but one parsha is so connected to another parsha, almost like they're 2 sister parshas. Why? What's the connection between Vayishlach and Vayechi? And if you look at if you examine what is the entire theme of the parsha Vayishlach, it is about Yaakov returning home to what would eventually become the land of Israel. And ultimately, we see that through the course of the next 4 parshas, in Parshat Vayigash, Yaakov goes down to Egypt. He's going back down into exile again, and he knows through a prophecy God tells him. He knows the prophecy that God told Avraham, Yitzchak, and to himself. This is the beginning of a long exile for the Jewish people. It's going to be 210 years, and after 210 years, they're going to be brought out from Egypt and brought back to the land of Israel. But Yaakov's concern is, he doesn't want to be buried in Egypt. The whole theme of the Parsha in Vayechi is Yaakov wants his body to be taken back to Hebron, to the land of Israel. And he half of the Parsha discusses that. And he makes Yosef swear that he's going to do this, and he discusses with Yosef and his children also parts of the land that he's promising them. And sure enough, Yosef does swear, and they do in fact bring Yaakov's body up and bury him in the Marat Machpelah. So these are the two themes of this parsha. In Vayishlach, Yaakov's coming back to Israel. In Vayechi, Yaakov is in Egypt, but he wants, now that he's dying, he wants his body to be buried in Israel. Why? Because that's where we belong. That's where a member of the nation of Israel belongs. That's where a Jew belongs in the land of Israel. That's the two commonalities of these two parshiot. A Jew belongs in Israel. That's our land. That's our heritage. And just like all these other three commonalities, what do these three things all have in common? It's all about the will of God. Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh finally accepts, after all these generations of the older sibling not accepting the younger sibling giving a superior position. Manasseh accepts that because it's the will of God. Yaakov accepts Shimon and Levi destroying Shechem because they acted on behalf of God. When he finds out that they acted in anger and not because of the will of God, then he condemns the motives for their actions. And then, of course, we see with Rachel. Rachel dies by the side of the road. Yaakov buries her right there. But now in Vayechi, he explains that he did it all because it was the will of God. The two parshat, Vayishlach and Vayechi, are about coming home to the land of Israel because that's the will of God. That's my Torah thought. What's yours? Thank you for watching. Shabbat Shalom.